Hello Bishes, welcome back to my channel. So I am once again doing another comic speed paint as per usual, and if you are from my Instagram, you probably already know what this comic is about, but for the YouTube Bishes, you probably might not know what it's about because I'm currently still thumbnailing it in this time lapse. So basically, this comic is going to be about a practice that my family observes as well as many other Asian families out there, and that is the practice of burning joss money to your deceased relatives or ancestors. And what is joss money? It's basically this type of paper that is often, provided for you at funerals. Usually they are Chinese or Asian, and this money is symbolically represented for money, I guess, and you can burn it in a can of fire, and this paper will basically be sent to wherever you believe your loved one has gone to. And things that can be joss money is not just money itself that's just fake. It could also be joss houses, joss cars, joss TV sets, I don't know. Things that you could ever possibly want to send to your grandma or your grandpa or a family member that has passed away. You can symbolically send them this luxury good through the form of joss money or joss paper. So for some backstory, my grandparents have all passed away a while ago, and it's been a while since I've seen any of them, but I would say that I was very close to all of them, and I miss them all to this day. But for those of you who have come from Asian immigrant families, you probably relate to this as well. But when our grandparents first got here, or your parents first got here, they pretty much came here with nothing. They had to pretty much start from zero, and it's pretty hard for people in their elderly years to develop a luxurious life when they move from another country and have to adapt to a whole new community and culture. So it's pretty much up to my parents or me and my generation to pretty much continue the whole family building in the United States. So I miss my grandparents, and we honor them even after they have passed because we are extremely grateful for what they've done for us and what they allowed our family to be able to do, because they came here for more opportunities and for a better life, and we wish that we could provide them the same when they were still alive. But I will say that my grandparents did live happy, wholesome lives when they were here, but in a way it's kind of bittersweet because now our family is advancing so much faster with, technology and just opportunities nowadays, and all of the grandkids are now going to college and graduating and getting jobs and starting to really settle down into their adult lives, and they're not really here to witness that we are able to do this because of them. And we still think about them a lot, even after they died. So we visit their graves and we burn this money for them, and we pretty much catch them up with our lives every time we visit their graves. And this is a practice that, again, many Asian parents and many other people of different cultures observe, but maybe they just have a different way of practicing the way that they honor them. Anyway, that was a very prolonged intro, but I thought it was important to provide so that people who are not of Asian descent can understand this practice and broaden their horizons and learn about something new, I guess. But other than that, that was not really the point of today's video topic. Well, I guess the video topic is kind of a little bit more related to the video today because I figured I would actually walk through the process of making comics while I'm actually doing the time lapse of it. But more importantly, I wanted to talk about how to make comics or art that will leave an emotional impact on people, because I feel like that is usually one of the key strong points of an animated film or animated shows, is people usually really enjoy them for its emotional factor and what insight it can kind of provide for you and your own life or your family, because animated projects and shows really know how to tie in some symbolic metaphor that you can then relay back to your own life, and it really makes you reflect. And I think that was one of the things that really got me into animation when I was really little, and here I am now being the one creating storyboards or stories that will hopefully do the same for others in the upcoming generations. Anyway, just to get the technical specs aside, for any of you who want to know what technical stuff I used, it is under tools below on the top right of this video, and I have also provided that in all of my previous videos for anyone who just wants to know how I technically created my artwork. But I wanted to talk more about, the emotional process of creating art that actually leaves an impact on people, because at the end of the day, art is again a form of communication, and everyone probably mentions this, but we create art to pretty much say something to maybe just ourselves or to an audience out there. And for artists, I feel like things are easier done than told, because we are often told that things are easier said than done. But I think artists have an advantage in leaving an impact on people by actually showing them instead of telling them, because when we are told things and we just hear things through a podcast, an audiobook, or someone just speaking to us, we think about it and we remember it for that moment, and for some certain lines, we might remember them for the rest of our lives. But I think for the most part, when we are just told things, it is easier to forget them. But when you actually are shown something and you experience it and you see it and you feel it and you are able to understand what the creator went through and you are able to empathize with it, I feel like that's just a whole other level of experience, because you are now able to probably remember this more for the rest of your life, because there were so many other sensories involved. And that is what I like about art, is that when you see an animated film, for example, you have visuals, you have audio, you have tone and atmosphere provided to pretty much mimic, what could have been real life. And that's kind of what comics can do as well. So as initially mentioned in this video, whenever you are making a story or artwork that is going to reach out to people and relate to people, it's important to know who the audience is that you're trying to make this comic for. And it's not always just to one audience specifically. I usually think it's a mixture and share between the audience that is going to identify with the comic that you made. So for this comic, for example, maybe the Asian American community will be the ones identifying it with. But for the audience that you're telling it to, maybe you're telling it to audience members that are not of that background. So for example, it could be anyone of any background, origin, country, whatever, that could be reading this comic and might not be of Asian American descent. But even though they have never practiced this practice that I just explained in the beginning of burning Joss money, they might not be able to relate to that because they've never done it, but they can relate to the idea of maybe they have lost their loved ones as well. Maybe they have lost their grandparents and they also have their own practice in some way of honoring them. And in their universe, maybe they also believe that their grandparents have all reunited and are in some happier, better place that is not Earth. In a way, I feel like that is how you're bringing two different audience groups together, because you have one group that will identify and resonate because they understand and have been through what you're talking about, and you'll have the group that has no idea initially about what you're talking about, but they're coming to understand it, and just by understanding it through your work, they now have the ability to maybe understand that other group that you made this comic to identify with. So in that sense, I believe you're not only making a strong emotional impact on an audience, but you're also making a social impact by bringing two socially different groups together. One that totally understands what you've been through because they are of the same background or culture, and one that might not be from the same background or culture, but they are now coming to learn to understand this other group because of you. And I feel like that is one of the strong points of animation, and why animation and art can have such a powerful voice in social commentary, because we can really teach people who don't know anything about a certain group of people or culture, and really teach them about it through a character's perspective. So on that note, if you want to create art that maybe can reach out and resonate to people that are not of your background, I will say maybe take something from your culture or your family history, and maybe try to make art that will teach that to someone in a way that they can relate to it. Like, what are some aspects of your culture or family that other people can relate to? Is it the fact that maybe you both honor your grandparents or your ancestors after they have passed? Like, what practices do you show to them? Or what ways do you think about your grandparents or your loved ones after they've passed? Maybe someone else had that same vision too. I don't know. There are so many ways that people can relate to feelings and thoughts that you might have, but you don't know it until you put it out there. Second, when you're executing the idea, I think that there are some important things to keep in mind, so that when you're actually creating this comic or artwork and bringing it to life, it will actually leave an emotional impact on people and not make them, dislike what you just made. Because, there are so many emotional and sad or touching stories out there, but some of them touch other people more than others. And I feel like there has to be some healthy balance of emotional and logic and rationality behind it, because you want people to buy what you created. You want people to believe what you created and not think like, oh, that was so overly sappy, or oh, that was so overly dramatic. Like, there are some levels that you have to play around with. And the one that I personally like the most is bittersweetness, because it's kind of, just straightforward. There's bitterness and there's sweetness to balance each other out. I could have easily made a comic about us literally losing our grandparents, crying our eyeballs out, and just talking about, oh, we're going to burn this Joss money to send to them because we're so overly sad by, their absence or something like that. But I feel like something like that would have been a little bit too literal, too melodramatic, and I'm pretty sure that there's a way that you can do something like that and have it work. But just for this comic, I just did not think that that was the way to go, and I thought the way to leave an impact more was to actually show what I thought happened after we burned the Joss money, for example. Like, this is the practice that I'm focusing the comic around, but I feel like instead of talking about everything that led up to it, that included, the death of the grandparents, I want to talk about more of the happy place that maybe I believe that they went to afterwards. And they're acting like normal characters in this comic as if they're alive, but the viewers know that, they're dead. These are living characters that you see in this comic, and they're so full of life, so vivacious, and so, almost believable. But at the same time, when you come back to reality, you remember that, oh, they're dead. And we kind of have that at the last panel of this comic, which is not being shown right now, but we're brought back to reality by the current day family, which is my family and my parents and sister, burning the Joss money for my grandparents. And I feel like in that moment is kind of when it hits, because you realize like, oh, those grandparents, those cute little grandparents we saw throughout the first 9 panels, they were so cute, I love them. And then you realize that, oh, they were not alive this whole time. So I guess what I'm trying to say with this at the end of the day is, just because emotions are so fluid and loose, I feel like when it comes to creating art that will actually leave an emotional impact on people, you actually kind of have to be a little bit strategic about it and how you're going to show it without being overly emotional and overwhelming to the point that viewers can't actually feel the emotion, because they're just like, oh wow, there's just a lot. That's crazy, or something like that. So when you're doing a comic or a story or some piece of artwork about death, for example, you can always literally just make a comic about the death itself, and yeah, it will still probably touch somebody out there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are many ways to play around it and think about the different layers or complexities to such a vague topic. Like, for example, how does this impact the living family members or friends that were left afterwards? Like, how are their lives different now because these people are gone? That would be interesting to explore. Or what are, again, the practices that people are doing to honor the death, and maybe explore that cultural topic a bit more. Or maybe the consciousness of the deceased person. Like, we don't know what happened to dead people really after they die, but maybe you can make a story about what the deceased person is going through now, or something like that. Like, there's so many ways to explore this topic. And then lastly, when actually executing the art itself, whether it be a comic, illustration, or animation, but I assume most of you here are from the comics and animation world, so I will talk more in that regard. But for, again, this case specifically, I am in animation, so I will talk about acting, facial expressions, shot choices a lot. And most of the times, whenever you're showing emotions, you might show things like facial expressions in close-up shots or medium shots, which is why a lot of artists tend to lean towards close-up and medium shots, because it clearly shows the expressions, especially if you're at that distance away from the character. You have a lot of clarity in knowing how they feel. So yes, close-up shots and medium shots of characters are great for moments that you really want to define what the character is feeling. However, I think sometimes we rely on it a little bit too much because it's kind of too easy at times. So there are still other ways you can showcase a character's emotion without being so close to their face. Sometimes you can show an extreme wide shot to show the emptiness, the realization. For example, it's not on this page specifically, but back on one of the earlier pages, there are panels where my two grandpas are talking to each other, and my one already deceased grandpa is talking to my main character grandpa, and he's just like, oh, you won't be needing that here, which is referring to his walker. And then my grandpa kind of just looks up into the sky, but we see him small and itty bitty on the ground, being like, oh. And it's like the character and the viewers are together making this realization that they're dead, like they're no longer alive. And in that way, we don't really need to be so close on their facial expression to realize that they're dead. I feel like it's a little bit too dramatic if you have a close-up on someone's facial expression when they learn that they're dead. But when you show the vast world or the environment around them and you make the character significantly smaller, it kind of gives viewers a sense of realizing something along with the character that is going to be important for the remainder of the story. This is another reason why I like to rely on comics when I don't have the ability to produce my own feature-length films on my own, because through comics you are able to still show staging and cinematography just without the motion, but you're still able to just block out what you would have intended if you saw this on the big screen, for example. So that's why I think if you would like to eventually make a film or an animation sometime in the future, but you don't have the capacity to create that at the moment, I would say comics are definitely a great way to pretty much show a narrative of the story that you had in your mind. But yeah, that was pretty much all I had to say in today's video. I don't know if it was a little bit too abstract for this, but let me know if you enjoyed a video like this, and maybe I can do more videos where I talk about the process behind how I make certain types of stories and comics. So yeah, thank you again for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one. And also, if you have any traditions in your family similar to mine, I'd love to hear what you do in your family, so let me know in the comments below. Anyway, yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.